Imagine the moment when humanity receives the most important news in its history. The definitive proof that we are not alone in the universe. It is no longer a theory, no longer a supposition, it is official. Scientists announced to the world that they have found alien life. It could be a simple microbe on Mars, or a more complex form of life on a distant moon of Jupiter. Perhaps even technological signals coming from a nearby galaxy. The form doesn't matter. The discovery alone would shake the very foundations of everything we believe. Within minutes, headlines would spread across the world. Social media would explode with speculation, memes, conspiracy theories. Every person, in every corner of the planet, would stop to reflect on a single truth: humanity is no longer alone. Governments would call emergency meetings. Rival nations would sit side by side to discuss what to do. Satellites, telescopes, and probes would be immediately redirected. The highest priority of global science and politics would be to understand who, or what, we have found. But the discovery would not only be scientific. It would be emotional, it would be existential. In an instant, all stories, all religions, all philosophies would need to face a new reality. Some would celebrate it as a sign of hope. Others would react with fear. And there would be those who refused to believe. The initial impact would be comparable to the arrival of man on the moon, multiplied by 1,000. It would not be just an achievement, it would be a turning point. A point of no return in the history of humanity. And while euphoria spread, one question would echo in every mind: what kind of life have we found? This simple question would define not only our reaction, but also our future. Because finding alien life is not just about looking outward. It is also about looking inward and asking ourselves who we really are in the face of the universe. After the initial impact of the news, the investigation phase would begin. Laboratories all over the world would mobilize to study every detail of this discovery. If it were a simple, microscopic form of life, it would still be revolutionary. It would prove that life can arise in more than one place in the universe. And if it can arise twice, it may have arisen millions of times. This would completely change how we see the cosmos. Until today, our science has worked with the idea that life, as we know it, is rare and special. But this proof would show that life may be a rule, not an exception. Telescopes would search for signals on distant planets. New space missions would be urgently funded. Robots sent to frozen moons, probes designed to dig beneath the surface of Mars. Spacecraft exploring hidden oceans under the ice of Europa or Enceladus. Every new piece of data would be treated like gold. Science would live through its greatest race since the space age. And if the discovery were more than microbes, if they were complex organisms with organs, senses, and behaviors, in that case, the impact would be even greater. The field of biology would need to be rewritten. New books, new theories, new models. We would be forced to expand the definition of life. Ethical questions would arise. Can we interact with these beings? Do we have the right to interfere in their environment? Or should we only observe, without touching, so as not to cause destruction? And the most shocking scenario: what if we found signs of alien technology? Radio waves from a distant civilization. A mathematical pattern that could not be natural. Or even artifacts left somewhere in our solar system. In that case, we would no longer be talking only about biology, we would be facing intelligence. And that would forever change the way we understand the mind, consciousness, and the place of the human being in the universe. Every scientist, every researcher, every science student would wake up with a new motivation. The pursuit of knowledge would no longer be merely academic. It would become the greatest collective challenge in our history. Because the question would no longer be just is there life out there, but rather, who are they? How do they live? And are they watching us? If science would celebrate the discovery, society would undergo an even greater transformation. Because the news that we are not alone does not only affect telescopes and laboratories. It affects hearts, beliefs, and everything we have considered true until now. Religions around the world would be challenged. Some might interpret the discovery as proof of the grandeur of creation. If God made Earth, why wouldn't He make other inhabited worlds? Some religious leaders would say. Others, however, might see it as a threat to scriptures, traditions, and even faith itself. Debates would arise in temples, mosques, churches, and spiritual communities. The search for answers would not be only scientific, it would be spiritual. Philosophy would also be shaken. For centuries we have discussed whether we are special, unique, chosen, but what if we are not? If an infinity of civilizations exists scattered throughout the cosmos, what does it mean to be human? This question would shake the collective identity of humanity. In politics, the discovery could provoke two paths. On one hand, fear. Governments could reinforce borders, increase military spending, prepare defenses against an enemy that may not even exist. On the other hand, hope. Nations could unite as never before, setting aside their differences to face a common destiny. The first genuine union of Earth could be born precisely from contact with the other, but we cannot forget the reaction of ordinary people. Some would be amazed, dreaming of interstellar travel and cosmic friendships. Others would panic, believing in invasions, wars, or even the end of the world. Movies, series, and books have always shaped our vision of aliens, and this cultural baggage would influence collective fear. There would also be economic impacts. Technology companies would rush to adapt to a new era. Entire markets could emerge from the attempt to decipher, replicate, or learn from alien life. Space tourism, once a distant dream, would gain new momentum. And along with it, inevitably, would come scams, fake news, and charlatanism, exploiting people's fear and hope. But above all, the discovery would force us to face an uncomfortable truth. We are not the center of the universe, and perhaps we never were. After the initial impact, the scientific analysis, and the social shock, the most important question would remain: what comes next? The discovery of alien life could open completely different paths for the future of humanity. And each of these paths would bring unpredictable consequences. In the most optimistic scenario, we would find peaceful beings interested in communication. A friendly contact could lead to an unprecedented exchange of knowledge. Advanced technologies, new energy concepts, interstellar travel, even cures for diseases that today are impossible to treat. It would be the beginning of a new era of global prosperity, in which humanity would stop looking only at itself and begin to look at the cosmos as a whole. But there is the cautious scenario: even if the beings found were intelligent, that would not guarantee friendship. They might see us with curiosity, with indifference, or even with hostility. The simple act of being detected could turn us into a target. And faced with that, governments worldwide would reinforce defenses, plan strategies, fearing the unknown. There is also the possibility that we may never reach direct contact. We may only find signals, traces, evidence that a civilization existed or still exists somewhere in the distant galaxy. In that case, we would live through centuries of speculation. We would know they are out there, but perhaps we would never manage to speak with them. And that would be, at the same time, fascinating and frustrating. Another possible scenario is the internal reflection. The mere certainty that we are not alone could already transform us as a species. We could unite, overcome wars, rivalries, and conflicts, recognizing that, in the face of the universe, we are all just humans. Or we could become even more divided, with nations fighting to decide who would have the right to establish the first contact. And there is still the path of fear. For some, any alien discovery would be seen as a threat. Paranoia could dominate governments and societies. And in that process, humanity could self-destruct even before any real contact occurred. In the end, all these scenarios have something in common. The discovery of alien life would forever change the trajectory of humanity. It would be impossible to go back. Perhaps the greatest impact would not come from what they would do to us, but from what we would start to do to ourselves. Alien life would force us to look beyond our planet. But, above all, it would force us to look inward. And in the face of this revelation, one question would echo forever in the mind of every human being: are we ready to no longer be alone?